Built to Own is about making money in the modern world and what it really looks like behind the scenes. I'm Erin McClafferty, realtor, small business owner, and lover of all things business. I'm constantly inspired by the people around me, the people building something out of nothing, the entrepreneurs, lenders, investors, creators, the people betting on themselves and figuring it out as they go. This podcast is my way of bringing you into those conversations. The real ones, the way they think about business, how they started, what they would do differently now, the trials and tribulations along the way of being an entrepreneur or owner, what worked, what didn't, and what they would do differently. It's people in all different stages of building a business and making money in this modern world. Because there's not one simple path anymore. There's no playbook for success. But there are patterns, mindsets, and decisions that separate the people who stay stuck from the ones that build real ownership, real income, and real freedom. This is Built to Own, where we learn how to build wealth on our own terms. Today is an episode I've really been looking forward to. We're here with one of my favorite lenders, John Allen, who is a wealth of knowledge on all things geopolitical, interest rates, and just really educated on how interest rates are affected by the world around us. He's not just a lender, he is a small business owner and entrepreneur. Being a realtor myself, lending goes hand in hand with being small business owners and really cultivating relationships to build sustainable business in the future. He is someone that built his business from the ground up and really understands what it takes to build consistency and long-term relationships in business. We're going to get into how he built his book of business, what got him into lending, how he thinks about money and risk, and what most people completely misunderstand about lending and financing in today's market. Because behind every deal and every loan approval, there is strategy, hustle, and a business being built. So if you ever wondered what it really looks like to grow in this space, or how lending plays into building wealth in the modern world, this conversation's for you. Hi, John.
Hi.
Thanks so much for being here today.
Thanks, Erin.
I'm excited to chat and kind of get into the basis of how you started your business and the success that you've achieved.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Excited to chat with you today about what's going on in the business and the larger kind of macro economy as well. There's a lot of interesting things going on. But I got into lending in 2002. Right out of college, did an internship with Citigroup. Back when we did paper files, I was the guy stacking loan files. And so just found a love of dealing with clients directly and sort of making the mortgage and the home buying process part of their overall financial journey and to build wealth. And so from then I went to Countrywide. Countrywide got bought by Bank of America.
Oh, you went straight there.
I went straight into...
Okay, so you've been there a long time.
Long time, 2002. And so I was originating for a good handful of years. When I was 26, I got my own team, a 35-person team.
Nice.
In a call center, so direct sales, business to consumer, and got to see a lot of lending changes, both through the great financial crisis and then in COVID as well. So managed teams from 2006 to 2022, got out of the business for a minute to own my own business.
Okay. Completely
Different industry, and then got back in the beginning of last year, and as an originator doing loans directly in this space and working for Cornerstone First Mortgage, and completely referral-based business. All the relationships that we've been lucky enough to build are really the source of business right now, and back to dealing directly with the consumer and the homeowner, which has been amazing.
Nice. Yeah. What a journey. I'd love to talk about the other business too at some point, but from when you started, where were your first couple of leads coming from? Were you under a mentor, or were you like cold calling? Yeah,
great question. A lot of cold outreach. A lot of the realtor relationships that I'd built up in the small business that I owned for a while, because they were similar industries. It was the moving business. And so, but a lot of it has been cold outreach to realtors, building relationships. Wow. I think anybody that gets into a referral-based business, the first thing I did was go through my phone.
Yeah.
Like family and friends, I made a list that ended up being like 4 pages long out of my phone, and just reaching out to people. I'm back in the business. What's your situation? Do you own a home? Are you interested in buying? And sort of generating a interest that way, and really finding out who needed help.
And it can feel really cringy at first. We're supposed to do that as realtors too. That's the first thing people say is go through your phone, call every single person, tell them you're a realtor. And I'm like, oh my God, I met this person at the bar 8 years ago. But you really never know. People are generally nice, especially if you're trying to come from a place of service.
Absolutely. Yeah, I found that you start small, right? You start in the middle of that circle of influence first. So it's family, it's friends of friends, and then you kind of spread out that way. But generally, people were pretty responsive, right? Like knowing that I'd been in the business for a long time, and that Cornerstone, which I know we're going to talk about, has a bunch of alternative loan programs for folks that maybe can't get helped by a big bank. And so that's a great value add for people that are in a unique situation that might need a little bit of help.
Yeah, definitely some creativity, especially if it's somebody that they already know and trust. It does kind of help that kickstart that relationship in a positive direction compared to some stranger they met on the internet that they don't know as much. Yeah, I know as a realtor too, people, and I didn't know getting into this industry that it was entrepreneurship and it was a small business and you had to grind and hustle. I guess from the outside world, people kind of, I think, just perceive it as a normal 9 to 5, and they don't see us up, at 9 p.m. trying to get clear to close or trying to get an offer out, and the weekends that we work and stuff like that. So it's an interesting perspective to bring to people of alternatives and how you can grind your way into an industry with no experience or no connections. Like, are you from San Diego originally?
I'm from Texas originally. Okay. I spent some time as a kid in California, single mom, so we moved around a lot. Mm-hmm. My wife's from Northern California, and so she moved to Texas when we got engaged and married, and as soon as she got there, she was like, this is not going to work for me.
Very different.
Well, very different. She's from Northern California, where the temperature changes like 5 or 6 degrees.
Yeah, humid there.
Totally. Mm-hmm. And so we made it back in the middle of COVID. Our kids were born in Dallas, and because we both grew up this way, wanted to raise them around the mountains and the beach. And so it was always our goal to get back out here, and we were able to do it in the middle of COVID, which was an interesting time to move to San Diego because I was like, the traffic's not that bad.
Oh, yeah, you would think.
We were spoiled. We were so spoiled. But no, we're happy to be here. There's no better place.
Good.
Frankly. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad it's all worked out in a positive direction. And are your hours flexible right now, would you say, or are you kind of all over the place? Like, what does a day in your life look like?
We're always on, right, in our industry. And I think that is part of the appeal to the customer base that you end up building out. And I think that once you're more established, maybe you curtail a little bit of that availability, but really in general, you have to be available because while the process might occur during business hours, homeowners are thinking and stressing and worrying about their transaction all hours of the day.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I always say that as a realtor too, because there's part-time realtors, and no offense to anybody, but it is the most important transaction of somebody's life.
Absolutely.
And if they're up late at night and have questions and the deal's falling apart and you can't get in touch with somebody because they're working their normal job, like I can't imagine not being able to provide that type of service. And I genuinely want to, and I'm sure you do too.
Absolutely. I feel like, as AI becomes a bigger part of our lives and so many people are on chat looking for advice and looking for guidance, that professionals in the industry that are more available and that can give you that sense of trust and security become more important, right? That source of truth from someone who's been in the business for a very long time and that is available anytime you have a question, just as an offset to some of the artificial information that we can get. Plus, I think that the news out there is just so driven for clicks that being able to be a source of real information on what's really happening on the ground gives people a bigger sense of trust, comfort, right? A little bit of visibility. You want to build a roadmap essentially of like, here's what the experience is going to look like from cradle to grave. And I think people really depend on that for professionals, right? That's part of what we do.
Yeah, it's so nuanced too. Like everybody's different situation. I did a segment on this before, but just ChatGPT in general, we're seeing that a lot as a new hurdle for realtors because they're going to that for advice. And it provides really great information sometimes, but it also has no context of the deal as a whole. Like if this is a competitive house, it's telling them they should request the entire inspection report and all of these things need done. It's sending them down like this spiral of nervousness. And it's not that information isn't true, that repairs need done, or like eventually at some point they are still repairs, but it's losing the context of the situation. Like, did we have to fight to get you in the house because you only had 5% down and we were up against 6 other offers?
Right.
And the seller's not going to give you anything. The chatbot doesn't know any of that, so it's going to tell you it's a bad deal and the world is falling apart.
Context is so key in these things, and I think the way that these LLMs are built is ultimately they're going to confirm what your prompt looks like. Is they're aimed to sort of agree, for lack of a better term, and that having the ability to guide someone on what's really going on versus just how good or bad your prompt is the key. And that maybe as we move forward, think these things will adjust and they'll get better. But ultimately, I think that our value really is being sensible and being able to kind of lay that roadmap out for people.
For sure. Yeah. Do you see the AI integrating in the lending business at all?
Absolutely. I think that especially in the alternative space for loans that either are low down payment or more specifically for entrepreneurs or investors that need another solution, a lot of lenders, Cornerstone included, have prompts where you can kind of send a scenario in. This is what I'm looking for. It's a bank statement loan, as a for instance. This is a cash flowing business. Here's their down payment. Here's the property type. And it'll give you a list of investors that kind of fit that criteria.
Oh, nice.
So you're not spending so much time looking through grids, right? And so it'll tee you up in terms of narrowing that product suite, which makes us better.
Right.
But then really understanding how the deal is actually going to work is going to take a professional to figure out.
Yeah. It's like, I think in my perspective, it's a great tool for us to use to make our process more efficient and provide better value faster for clients. But if to go in as a client without a license and try to figure it out yourself, that's a huge hurdle of understanding that you're just trying to like skip over.
That's right.
Whereas if we use it to help them, it is definitely a benefit for everybody involved. I did want to ask you about the beginning of your career versus now, and how were there hurdles along the way? Like, did you see kind of rises and falls of consistency, and how have you overcome that to be more consistent, if it is more consistent now, or does it really depend on the general market?
Yeah, I think in both of our industries, the ebbs and the flows are so market driven that that the consistency often relies on where that homeowner confidence is. And everybody is so nervous and anxious now about affordability that that's the biggest driver, honestly, is we've seen rates come down 0.5% compared to where we were last year. We're up a little bit with the Iran conflict, which I know we're going to talk about, but that's really been the driver. Is in a referral-based business, you're ultimately trying to build that consumer base where you've always got somebody to call, you've always got a partner that you can help out. But so much market-driven affordability has really been the main driver of ebbs and flows for me.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because in the beginning you started, it was cold calling realtors, trying to get connected with them and get referral-based business from realtors sending you their clients. I know now you cold call through our stuff too. So do you feel like that is what really got your business off the ground, is just the grit of being bold enough to reach out to people that you didn't know and cold call and that hustle? Yeah,
I think it comes down to relationships, right? Is that, and what we see in our business is you've usually got purchase business and you've got refinance business. And you've got these two buckets that are sort of competing for volume. Where is the transaction volume occurring? And while refinances have dropped, they're up this year from last year because rates have improved. There's always going to be people driven by life circumstances that either need to move up, move out, move down, right? Somebody, empty nesters. There's almost always an opportunity for help in some form or fashion. And thankfully, after 2008, there was several years where there was no alternative lending program. So entrepreneurs and investors were sort of left out of the market. Right. So I see still a ton of transaction volume in the non-owner occupied property segment where people are building their portfolios of properties. And so if you can make relationships with folks that are doing transactions in that vertical, you're almost always busy regardless of the market, because these people are adding and subtracting portfolio properties, to build wealth. So
yeah, it's timing for them, and a lot of the time they do try to capitalize when the market's down or when it's not the most ideal situation, and a lot of the time they have a lot of cash too. Right. So it's a little bit more flexible.
Dealing with that demographic, that liquidity piece gives them so much leverage in the market. And like you said, when the anxiety level's high or when the nervousness is high around the market, there's opportunity built in there for sure.
Do you feel like that's the main portion of your business right now that you focus on, is investors, or do you lean first-time home buyers, move-up buyers, or is it kind of a combination of all?
Great question. I think first-time home buyers, firstly, they're a lot of fun to work with, because I think at the heart of what we do, we're educators, right? And so translating the very technical information that we have in our industry into something that's more understandable and digestible, that's where I really enjoy the business. So we've seen a big uptick in first-time home buyers as affordability has increased. But then in the investor space, that's the folks that can navigate these market changes with less turbulence, right? Because the liquidity piece and just the knowledge of navigating those types of markets. I think from a referral standpoint, building relationships with realtors that specialize in that area, you'll almost always be busy. Yeah.
Okay, cool. As far as your general take on your business, and we have pillars in real estate of like what you want to focus on, if it wants to be open houses, if it wants to be cold calling, if it wants to be, your network. Do you feel like you lean mostly realtor to realtor relationship, or do you have a focus on marketing?
Yeah, that's a great question. What I've been focusing on a lot lately is, you want to build these referral partners, but ultimately in a referral relationship, there's this reciprocation value that really is the heart of that relationship. And so what I have found useful recently is, rather than focusing on a transactional referral, which we will all take. I would love to give you a buyer. You would love to give me someone who's ready to write an offer and that's purchasing a home, is focusing on these sphere of influence introductions of, while the transactional referrals are valuable and welcome, really, I would rather introduce somebody who's going to 10x their business because of their network in their business. So in a lot of the meetings that I've had with realtors or other referral partners recently, it's who can I introduce you to that's going to 10x, right? What are the real roadblocks in your business from a transaction standpoint that I can help facilitate? And those are the relationships that I find are stronger because there's a mutual understanding of what can really build the business.
Yeah.
So for me, the main pillar right now for me is interaction volume. How many one-to-ones can I get? I'm much better in a one-to-one kind of relationship than I am in like a room full of a networking event, for instance. Yeah. Somebody made this analogy recently that I thought was so funny is dealing with those networking events where there's pods of people that are kind of in their conversations.
And they know each other usually.
Exactly. Yeah. It's kind of like trying to pick somebody up in a bar. It's like, I can't hear you really, like you're leaning in to try and like, make
you gotta
your
make
point.
the approach.
That's right. That's right. And so I while those are fun for the social component of it, because I think we're all social animals, especially folks in our industry, you have to like that.
For sure.
The one-to-ones are where I can really get into how can I help your business? Who are the folks that I can introduce you to? Yes, we will work on transactions. That's key. But what are the relationships that we can create together that benefit us both?
Yeah, and I think that's a huge part of understanding your industry and understanding the different options that you have that fit your personality. Like I was saying before, we as realtors, it's like, do you want to do open houses? And I know a lot of people that kill it at open houses or that's their thing. And when I started, I was doing the open houses too, but then I was jealous of my friends out on the weekends, I'm not going to lie, and I just did not like standing there begging people to give me their phone number in a vacant house. Like the whole thing to me just wasn't really my jam. I'll still do them now for my listings and my clients and every once in a while, but I found that my niche is coming from my friends and my sphere of influence. Like I am so lucky to be surrounded by a lot of successful people in their late 20s, early 30s, and I just constantly keep getting introduced to new people. Like I went out to lunch with my friend and his new girlfriend, and she brought a friend, and this friend all of a sudden wants to buy like a multi-million-dollar house. So it just comes up naturally in social settings for me. So I think my biggest pillar is being like a party animal and being social and like meeting people through that and being genuine about it and not being in their face is where I really found my stride. And it's interesting, you just don't think about that as a job, but that's part of what building a business and entrepreneurship is finding what works for your personality and finding the space to be able to like execute that. I think.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. You're the same with the one-on-one settings, but you're also a cold caller. So I gotta give you credit for that too, because that's bold, especially these days with people not answering the phone as much. Do you feel like there's a vast difference from when you started? Were you always cold calling?
It's always been a component of the business, and I absolutely find that it has become harder, but I also feel like the harder activities within a given business where referrals are part of it, if you can stick to it, that ultimately more is more, right? It's about volume of activity and that consistency piece. I had somebody tell me recently, find whatever activity you hate the most and do that.
Yeah, do it first.
Do it first, right? Eat the frog is what they say. And so I have found that if I can embrace the suck more than my peers, then eventually that's going to pay off. And so there's a patience component to it. But being in the industry for a long time, you're used to that. You're used to the ebbing and flowing of the market. And ultimately, if you have a process that you can stick to and commit to, that it's going to pay off in the end. It's just part of it's faith-based too, right? It's just knowing that this has worked in the past. Yeah. You have your pillars. You've got your relationships that you're going to build. And, you make a great point about friends and family in the sphere of influence. If you can find a way to present your value that's not super thirsty, then it's going to come back to you in some way, that value add.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think that's probably the biggest hurdle with the cold calls is they don't know you. You're literally just blowing up their phone, which I know I hate. So, and now there's the Google screening. So you have to tell them who you are and why you're calling. You don't even get that first opportunity to hit them with a pitch. But I guess the positive thing about that is that if they are not interested in talking, they'll just ignore you.
That's right.
And you could leave a voicemail and follow up. And I think most people, especially my generation, prefer texting. So you could hit them from that angle. But yeah, that's been a whole nother hurdle is you can't even we trained on the objection handling and how to convert and the tonality of all of it. And now you don't even get that opportunity.
Now sometimes you pray for an objection.
Yeah.
Just please, can I talk
Talk
to
me.
somebody?
Don't hang up.
Yeah. Let's just connect. But absolutely, I mean, and I think the text point you make has changed the outreach as well. Like you have to be good, you have to be engaging, and it changes your language a little bit, I think. And yeah, so I've made some adjustments there.
Yeah.
But again, it's like volume, right? You just have to commit and really just grind.
Keep at it.
Yeah.
For every person that tells you to F off, there's going to be maybe one that says yes. So it's all
That's
kind
right.
of worth it in the end. And yeah, I agree with having to change it up for the texting, because I have gotten told stop. Like they think I'm a robot sometimes. And that's made me be like, okay, what is in this text that they don't actually, it's literally me typing this and they're like, unsubscribe. All right, fair enough. And you got to kind of change it up or maybe be a little bit more personal. Like, nice to meet you and your daughter, Sue, at the thing and whatever. So yeah, always trying to get ahead of the curve, I guess.
And sometimes I like to have fun with it a little bit of like, I'm not a bot. Hope you have a great day. Kind of thing.
Please answer me. Yeah. It's tough, but it's good that we're both figuring our way out in the new world. You mentioned before how you pivoted and started a different business. If you're open to sharing the thought process there and what that looked like.
Sure. So, like I said, I spent a large part of my career managing teams. And I think as a salesperson, there's a lot of power and independence and freedom in being direct to consumer and being there at the client facing level. And there's a whole other set of challenges with managing folks, right? Where you're literally kind of your success is on the backs of other people. And so I think different skill set completely. And to a degree, you're limited in that ceiling by the people that you're managing. And I was fortunate enough to manage some really incredible salespeople through my career. But I think after, I guess it was 16 years that I was leading people, I found that I needed more control over the outcome. And so I went into entrepreneurship in a different vertical entirely and ended up managing people again. So there's no way to get away from it effectively, right? As a business owner, you're not only managing your team, but really everything, the P&L, the marketing, and everything. So was happy to come back into the industry and focus on myself and the things that I can control. And I like to say that the maximum amount of direct reports I'll ever have again is 2, because I have 2 kids, and that's my team. That's my max team size. Yeah.
And they got your genes too.
That's
so
right.
It's like, that's the hustle's in there.
I'm invested in the outcome more so than I ever was with the sales team for sure.
That's funny. I'm the same way too. I started my first job out of college was enterprise car sale. Well, enterprise rent a car. So I was selling the insurance slinger. And I was really good at that. And I had started a business before in college, an exterior house painting company, door-to-door sales. So I knew I was good at sales and I thrived in that environment. And then, once you hit a year in and I'm doing really well, they want to promote you to management. And I got stuck at a really awful branch downtown, homeless people everywhere. We had like a really dingy garage. And I had a group of people that had been working, most of them had been working there a long time. And most of them were nice people. They didn't give a crap.
Nobody cares as much as you do.
Yeah. And right? I was the newest one. Like I was kind of the fast riser in enterprise. And I had people that had worked there years more than me. So to gain their respect as their manager and try to get them to care about building this branch, why would they care about building the branch? Like there's no incentive for them to do that. That's my incentive. So it was really hard to motivate people that I don't blame them. Like they don't have skin in the game. So that's when I realized that a manager's not for me. I was getting so frustrated with, because I know the work ethic I have and like my drive, and I get it. It's just a car thing. But I directly went into car sales at that point because I was like, I could grind and hustle and make more money doing this rather than banking on other people that might not have the same drive.
Yeah, my path was super similar, right? I was 25 when I was offered the promotion and doing really well, in the top 10% of the company. And I think that path is so similar, where if you're good at sales, well, naturally you'll be a good manager.
Like
that's
you.
Right. And any advice I would give to a salesperson that's really rocking, don't leave.
Yeah.
just keep doing what you're doing. Just because I think that the ceiling is much, much higher if you're in charge of yourself and you can focus on your own development.
For sure.
Rather than trying to depend, like you said, on folks that maybe have been there a long time and have checked out, or they're up and coming and it's maybe a stepping stone to something else.
And it's a transferable skill set too. So sales specifically, if you get good training in any bullshit industry, it doesn't even matter. If you have good training, you can transfer that to, like, that's how I got into real estate. Is I was selling cars, and one of my clients one day was like, what are you doing here? You should do real estate. You'd make a lot more money. Like, I was surrounded by just, middle-aged guys that nobody liked their job. We were there every weekend and we had to be there, even if we didn't have clients coming in, and it was very structured. And I knew I wasn't going to stay there, but going into taking those skills and going into a career that the sky is the limit, you can make literally as much money as you can make in real estate with the same skills. I think that's why sales is such a valuable skill to have. Like, you could do as much as you want. I could do as much as I want. We could take this to another industry and kind of rinse and repeat, learn new objections and techniques.
Yeah, it's relationship building in the end, right? Like every industry, I think, has its technical components that you've got to get to and be an expert if you're going to really be the source of truth and guidance that people need. That's an important part of the success, but ultimately it's about, can you connect? Can you offer value? Can you, maintain a reciprocal relationship where you're both growing together? And that's a skill, right, that you can do in anything, for sure.
Definitely. Yeah, well, thank you so much for sharing your insight on how you got where you are. And I think I love these conversations. I have them with my friends all the time and other entrepreneurs. And I think it's just inspiring to hear how you get to where you are. And sometimes it's not a direct path. Your path was pretty consistent from when you begun, and you just honed in on the skills. So I think it's super interesting. So thank you so much for sharing.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of different ways to get there. Mine was fairly linear. It took a little bit of a detour, but you pick up experience all the way that you can ultimately leverage in building those relationships and making those more rich.
Awesome. Well, I do want to pivot and get into more of your take on, you have such great insight on geopolitical environment and interest rates and what this means when this happens and all of that.
Yeah.
And I love talking to you about it because you really dumb it down, and I can't reiterate it the same way to my clients. So I would love for you to get into the state of the world, I guess, and what you think is going to happen short term, long term, and just anything you'd like to share.
Yeah. So, broadly speaking, rates have been on a continual improvement trajectory, which everybody in the industry has been super excited about. Rates at the end of February were under 6, which we've not seen in 3 years.
Yeah.
The two big components of that rate movement that the Fed really monitors, and so does the mortgage bond market, right, is unemployment and inflation. Unemployment has continued to soften. We lost 92,000 jobs in February. Not great for anyone, but good for mortgage rates and generally good for real estate because it creates opportunities and it increases affordability as rates drop. And so that's good for first-time home buyers because we really want new homeowners in the market, participating in the market. That's good for everybody. That's good for the economy.
Right.
Then the Iran conflict hit, right? For first beginning of March. The price of oil shot up to, I think, 119 was its max. That's inflationary. That increases prices for everybody because there's not a country in the world that doesn't use oil in some form or fashion, both for transportation and for production. And so you've got these competing sort of data points, unemployment and inflation. Unemployment is in a place where it's good for rates. Inflation is rising, right?
So
prices.
they're kind of combating each other.
They're combating, right? Yeah. And so the Fed is meeting today. Jerome Powell's speaking as we have this meeting. And the Fed is really in a rock and a hard place because unemployment data would point to dropping rates, while oil previous to the Iran conflict or inflation rather, would be previous to the Iran conflict was already rising. And so they're in kind of a hold position right now. We got some improvement earlier this week that brought rates down to about 6.25, 6.125, which again, you compare that to last year, we're 0.5% down. Right. On an $800,000 loan, that's $240 a month in savings, right?
Yeah.
From last year to this year.
Yeah.
And if you take it down another 0.5%, which once the Iran conflict resides, that's another $240 on an $800,000 loan. So
and
almost
that's no points either. That's
right.
just straight up what it is.
That's right. And so you're talking about $600 a month for the average homeowner in San Diego, which is it's a car payment. It's significant. And so where I think this will go, and at this point, you ask 100 people, you probably get 100 different
Yeah.
answers. But the data that is the backdrop to all of mortgage pricing is such that if inflation is tamed, which again, who knows where we'll go, but because of unemployment, likely we can get rates back down under 6 once we see some of this resolve.
Okay.
The challenge not only is oil, I just read this the other day, that there's a bunch of other commodities that are transferred through the Strait of Hormuz, which has been closed, like fertilizer as an example, and a lot of food.
Yeah.
It's part of the food chain production. So hopefully we see some resolution sooner rather than later, both just for the health of the world, but also for affordability in general. The data point that came out yesterday was the producer price index, which is wholesale prices. So if you're manufacturing something and I've got to get 10 different widgets from different places to produce my goods, that was up, I think, 50% higher than what they were expecting.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. And so that's wholesale inflation. That's not consumer inflation just yet. So when you add the price of oil and all of the downstream effect of that going up, plus the wholesale prices that with tariffs and plus what manufacturers will ultimately have to charge to consumers, we're going to be in a tough spot.
Yeah, because people, if their everyday life goes up so much, they simply stop thinking about buying a home because they can't afford to live. That'll be an interesting other effect on the market, is if we have a bunch of people pulling out because they just simply don't think they can afford it anymore, regardless of rates.
That's right. And in San Diego, you've got homeowners that are sitting, I think of the average I saw last time I checked was $500,000 in equity. Wow. So you've got all these people that are locked in the threes that need to do something, where our refinance volume was starting to tick up. Now it's stopped, right? Because people are waiting. They're waiting and seeing what's going to happen. But I think as rates tend to improve over the next couple of weeks, hopefully, Iran conflict notwithstanding, you'll tend to see more of this refinance volume pick up. You'll see a little bit of activity come back into the market with application volume, and that affordability piece will increase and improve for everybody.
Hopefully. So what's your perspective on, I mean, fingers crossed it doesn't happen, but if this war escalates and it doesn't cease anytime soon, what's your perspective on how that can affect interest rates?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's very few people talking about that because there's so much hopefulness about it resolving quickly, because the circumstances that were completely data driven were looking so good. But I think that the oil supply globally, there's so much dependence on that Strait of Hormuz. It's 20% of the world's oil. And so I think what you would probably see from a mortgage rate standpoint is rates holding or rising a little bit. And we would have to tap into, I mean, there's Venezuela, right? We've got all that oil now. We have our own reserves that they could try to mitigate some of that. But whereas mortgage rates were starting to be less headline driven and a lot more predictable, the bond market, now we're starting to see commentary from the administration or others that are really driving those rates around. So it's anybody's guess. There's more Fed meetings. Obviously, there are 8 per year, so we've got 7 more this year. There's one more rate cut built into the system currently. One of the things they go over in the Fed meetings is what's called a dot plot, which will dot out what the year is going to look like in terms of the changes that they'll make. So there's one rate cut built in. Powell's commentary today may change that. Again, he may punt and just say things are too crazy right now. That won't be his language. Yeah, but it'll be very formal. But right. And so I think rates hold or increase a little bit if nothing else changes. Good news is affordability is still improved from where we were at last year. San Diego market's still hyper competitive. I think we're at 2 to 3 months supply right now. Yeah, we're starting to see things go over list price again, and like we were talking about before, you have to buy when it makes sense for you and your circumstance. It's so hard to time, especially with all this craziness going on. Like, it's anybody's guess, and if you can afford it and if it's your goal, there are solutions to make it happen for you. And depending on your circumstances too, like if somebody doesn't have the most competitive down payment, it's probably better to buy when it's uncertain or when it's less competitive, because you're simply, if you got 5% down, you're going up against a bunch of cash offers because people finally took the money out of their home and they have all this equity, or it's, once you hear it's a good time to buy, it's probably too late for the first time home buyers with 3% down, unfortunately, because your terms really can't compete at the same level. Or like we saw during COVID, the craziness of the 3% interest rates, where all of a sudden it's
my first deal, for example, the house was $1.55 million, and there were like 9 offers. He had to bid it up to $1.8 million to get the house. And we didn't even get the house. We were the backup, but ended up getting it. And in that case, it just doesn't appraise.
Right.
And I think that's what a lot of people don't understand is, yes, on paper, even if rates go down, you might be able to afford more. It doesn't mean the comps support that value. So if the appraiser goes out and decides the house isn't worth that, the bank doesn't give you that. So then you have to have that cash. So even if you are a bold first-time home buyer that's willing to, swing for the fences and really get competitive with your offers, you literally can't if you don't have that cash, unfortunately. So
yeah,
it's a little bit hard to time if you're waiting for the perfect opportunity if you don't have the terms to be involved in that.
That exact thing happened to me and my wife. We bought in 2021. We looked at 41 different houses.
Oh,
we had a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old with us in tow for all of those open houses, which it sounds about as much fun as it was. We were up against several offers. We lost out on our offer on the house that we loved that we actually ended up in. So like 2 weeks later, it fell out for inspection. We ended up getting the house that we wanted. But I think it's important to explain to buyers exactly what you're alluding to, which is that shopping experience changes incredibly when the dynamic of the market flips back to where sellers are in control. And so we're in this unique little market right now in San Diego where the demand is so low that the sellers that have to sell, because those exist, people have to move, they're going to get better seller participation in those experiences, and so that's huge.
Yeah, you don't need to focus as much on is the interest rate 6% or 6.1, because you could just ask the seller to give you a credit to buy it down. Like my first house that I bought probably during the worst interest rate situation, and I bought it on a busy street. Like I just wanted to get in, and I was ready to get in, and I did. I bought a fixer on a busy street at the rates were around 7 at that point, but I bought it down to 6.3, which was still a crazy mortgage. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't have that much down payment, but because I was able to get so many credits, like I was able to get all of the credits to redo the house from the seller because it was not competitive, that I ended up selling a 1.5 years later, and I made a large profit on it, because you just have to be smart about what you're getting into and the position that you're in when you get in it, and then it's never going to be a bad decision as long as you think through maybe like plan A and plan B.
Right. Yeah, the leverage that buyers have right now is something that a professional, that's why it's so important to have somebody in your corner explaining what the landscape really looks like. I would say there's probably 7 out of 10 deals that we're doing right now on purchases that have a seller contribution of some kind, some of them significant, where you can offset these increases that we've seen in rates entirely and kind of recreate that affordability that we're talking about when rates are lower. And again, it's about buyer leverage and having that right now. Loan programs are an important part of that. There are lots of down payment assistance programs out there that we want to talk about. That again, having a professional in your corner to walk you through that is key. And I'll also say that the advice I'm giving people now is to start earlier than you think is necessary. Sometimes we have to work on credit. Sometimes we have to work on savings. I think people are hesitant to have the conversation with either a realtor or a lender or both until they're ready.
I agree. I see that a lot on my end. A lot of my friends don't want to bother me, or whatever the case may be, or they think they need to save up way more than they probably actually do, or they actually have this huge credit thing that who checks their credit that often? It's good to start, I would say, a year out, if not more. If you even have the inkling that you want to buy in the next 3 years, you should just talk to somebody, pick a lender, pick a realtor that you want to work with, see what your options are, and get set up on a search so that you could get familiar and keep a pulse on the market, because you can see if you're getting home notifications every week, oh, this one went. If you like one, favorite it, you could see it went in 3 days. Maybe it's very competitive out there, whereas, maybe your parent that bought $1 million years ago and thinks it's a bad time to buy is saying that you should go in and ask for, bid $100K low. You can see for yourself in that situation exactly how the market's moving and if things slow down and when you want to jump in. And that's why I think down payment assistance is so underestimated. People don't realize how many options they have out there. There was just the California Dream for All, which is a great program, and that's the one I think people are more familiar with, at least in my sphere, because I'm shouting it from the rooftops. That one, they just give you the money for free. Well, not for free, you have to pay it back eventually, but they give you the full 20% down and makes it a lot more affordable. But there are a lot of other options where you maybe don't need that 100K that you think you do.
Right.
What are some of the programs that you guys have for maybe first-time home buyers?
The two most popular are Cal HAFA and GSFA, right? And you can get into these properties with very, very little money. And so that's what we find a lot with first-time home buyers is the credit might be good, their income might be great to qualify, but the assets they have put together for down payment are just not there. That's one of the best things about buying in California is all of these buyer programs. There's over 3,000 down payment assistance programs in California. They allow for seller contribution, so back to the buyer-seller dynamic that we're talking about in this market, it is a great way to get in. If you can afford it, there's no such thing as too early in terms of starting to explore these things. Sometimes these loans take a little bit longer to close because you're dealing with the state agencies.
Oh, okay, good to know.
But you can get in for zero down. You've got to have a little bit of reserves. You've got to have decent credit. I mean, there are programs that'll go down to 660, 640, and all the way down to 600 in terms of FICO scores. So you can have credit that needs some work and still get into a home as long as you can afford it. So there's lots of opportunity.
Yeah, so I think the kind of ideal for that situation, especially in California, salaries are pretty high for the most part. It's still, buying a home is still pretty good. It can be unaffordable for sure, but if you have a high salary and you can handle more of a monthly payment and you don't have the 100K built up, that's really, I think, who this is a sweet spot for if you're bringing in a lot of money, because then the down payment portion, it's still there, right? They give you that as a loan on top of the mortgage loan. So you have your loan and then you have another one at a different interest rate.
That's right. So with Cal HAFA and GSFA, you've got a second mortgage. One of them has a payment on it, one of them does not. But it is at the same rate as your first mortgage, so it's very reasonable. It's never too early to at least explore what the options look like. I think the example that you gave of buying and then selling a year and a half later is a perfect example of how we have to have the rent versus buy conversation, right? And that building that equity is going to give you a return on your money, even if you've only got a small down payment, more so than being invested in the market. And that's, I think, the argument a lot of people make is, I'll take that money and I'll invest it and I'll get a better return. Oftentimes that investment doesn't ever get made. And when you're in a home as a homeowner, you're invested. You're in the market. There's going to be a return. You're going to get appreciation on properties, especially in hot markets like San Diego.
Yeah, and it depends on your goals too. I mean, most people move after 2 to 5 years. They think it's their forever home and then they end up moving. So that's why you got to kind of know what your play is. If you are going into a house where you know your kids are just starting school and you really feel confident that you're going to be sat for a minute, then it's one thing to get a certain kind of house. But if you're just trying to get your foot in the door as a first-time home buyer, there is no faster way to build equity, in my opinion, than getting a little fixer-upper, maybe doing a hard money loan direction, which I'd love for you to explain if you've done any of those. They could be, it's very complicated and scary to explain to people getting something like that, but that's the way you move equity the quickest. If you put in some money to maybe not the most attractive house on the block, you're not going to live there forever.
Right.
And then in a few years, after 2 years, tax-free, you can sell that and you can move those proceeds into something else. Like I transparently made I got 50K investment in that property and I made 50K in just a year and a half. Like I wouldn't have saved that quickly probably. So there's no faster way to kind of double your money and keep it moving than buying smart. And it's not just buying too, because I am seeing, especially nowadays from like 2 years ago, there isn't a lot of appreciation to go around in a lot of neighborhoods unless you bought smart or you bought in that certain way. So that's why, if you're thinking you're going to be moving every 2 years, maybe don't get the overbid for the nicest house on the block and do something like that. You got to think of it a little bit more strategically as an investment. Yeah. But I'd love for you to explain in lender terms the buying a fixer-upper, maybe having to compete with investors, hard money loan, construction loan, and refinance.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that's where we see a lot of investors focusing on is distressed properties that need a little bit of love. And these are people that might just be DIYers by nature, or they're going to learn that fix and flip process through the homeownership, experience. And that's where in California, when you've got higher rents and you've got higher mortgage cost because of the value of the home, buying those distressed properties and putting some love into them and then starting to cash flow those properties and building that equity by way of adding value, sweat equity to the house, that's where we see the most smart investors really getting a return on their capital.
For sure. And a lot of the traditional investors are coming in, like in that market, if you are a normal first-time home buyer, you're not an investor that knows anything, it is a competitive space here because there is a lot of meat on the bone and the juice is worth the squeeze in a lot of places. And you can look at that before. You don't go in blind. You look at the comps. You work with a professional. So a lot of the investors are coming in with straight up hard money loans or cash and trying to get them for as low as possible. But if you are a normal homeowner that just wants a good opportunity to get in and you're willing to learn and put some money in and be a little bit creative, you can outbid those investors because they're looking at it from a profit margin of flipping that house as fast as possible, making the most money as possible, paying their guys and getting out. Whereas if you're going to live there, you can beat them by paying more. They're like bottom dollar. You can be like a little bit over bottom dollar even if you're a normal person and beat out those investors and get that house, and still you're going to be there like 2 or 3 years. You'll build the equity in that period of time way faster. They're trying to flip it in like 3 months. So it's a way different situation. You just have to you can't come in with an FHA loan a lot of those times because the house, sometimes won't even appraise, or you can't get a loan on it. So that's why you have to go the hard money loan angle. Which do you guys do those?
We have connections to lots of hard money lenders, and it's usually the option of last resort, right? And more often than not, it's for credit reasons and less property based. But you make a great point in that those investors are looking to get in and out and get a quick return on their money, and that you don't have to be super competitive and over leverage yourself to get in those homes. You just got to be smart about it. I think also a great point that you made is being a little bit more patient if you're going to be an investor, a first-time investor, and live in the property. That's a little bit longer term to play. That's a 2 or 3 year versus like a 6 month let's fix and flip. But I love making that example in the buy versus rent, because a lot of folks say, well, if I buy a home, I'm stuck. And I think in a competitive real estate market like San Diego, I'm sure you'll echo this, is you can get out of a house pretty quickly, a lot faster than you can out of a lease, oftentimes, that you're locked into.
As long as you're realistic with pricing, and your agent will go over that. And if there's no comps that say it's worth $1 million, if it's showing it's worth $800,000, then you don't list it at $1 million, or else you'll probably be sitting on the market for 2 years. So you just have to, as long as you're strategic and going into it, you should kind of have your finger on the pulse of the market and understand where you're buying. And I always recommend trying to buy a little bit low into it if you're planning on moving out pretty quickly. But in those cases too, a lot of people are like, oh, I don't have the cash to do these repairs, and it sounds really overwhelming. First of all, there's great general contractors, and if you're going to be living there, just learn how to DIY it. I learned how to build a fence. It wasn't a great fence, but you could learn most of this stuff and then get an electrician for the scary stuff and the more complicated things. But if you don't have the money, you can also take out a construction loan and use that to fix the house. And then once the house is fixed and you maybe have a hard money loan, you can then reach out and go through the traditional lending method of getting an actual regular mortgage and refinance at that point. And at that point, they could take out the money, the equity that they've built.
That's right. Yep. Sometimes there's timing requirements around how much since they've purchased. Usually 180 days is what we need to season for them to realize the new value of the improvements that they've made. But generally speaking, especially if you're doing it yourself and you got a full-time job, 6 months, you go to sleep and wake up and you're in the property for a year. So YouTube has been incredible. I'm not a DIYer by nature, but man, I've learned some incredible things on YouTube.
No, same. Yeah, so in that case, if you wanted to go that route, refinance, you could either take that equity and then buy another one and keep rolling, or live there, hold the equity in the house, and then wait until you're ready to move up, and then you have a fat pot of equity to play with then that you wouldn't have if you just maxed out your monthly payments and went the traditional route right off the bat. So there's a lot of options to be creative, especially if you are willing to learn and be patient and maybe go a route that sounds a little crazy. It's not. People do it all the time.
Well, and again, to your point, when there's so many people holding, waiting, trying to see what's going to happen with the market, there's opportunity there because sellers have to sell.
For sure.
Yep.
Yeah. Last thing I wanted to get into was different loan programs. Kind of what's your opinion on 30-year fix? Is that the best route for people to go right now?
That's a great question. Yeah, 30-year fix is going to remain most affordable. ARMs have been popular, right? So you've got fixed period ARMs that are 5 or 7 year. There are others, but those are the most popular. Those rates are going to get you a little bit of savings as well. You've got interest only. If you're an investor and you want to try and maximize cash flow, you can minimize that payment. We've got FHA and VAs that are still under 6% today, while everything else is at 6.2, 6.3. So there's a ton out there where affordability is still first and foremost, right? And then the other category of loan programs that I would just spend a minute talking about is alternative documentation. So if you're a business owner and you've got a cash flowing business, but you've got an aggressive tax strategy, or you might be showing a loss, or you might be using depreciation, right? Cost segregation analysis is a big thing from a tax advantage standpoint, that there are a ton of loan programs out there that went away for a while that are now completely back. Competitive interest rates.
It's DSCR is one of those.
DSCR
right?
is huge.
Yeah, for my investment one.
DSCR is huge, and so as long as the rent covers the mortgage, you're in a good spot. And if you've got decent equity, or you've got a significant down payment, you oftentimes can get the same rate as you'd get on an owner-occupied property on DSCR. So 25% down for DSCR, really you've offset all of the rate increases that you would normally have.
For sure, yeah. I think mine's actually is like 6.3, and I got it in October. So.
There you go.
Not too shabby.
Not too shabby.
Backing up to the ARMs and touching on what we were just talking about with how people move more often than you think. If you're buying your first home, maybe you're engaged or you just got married and you guys are ready to take the step to home ownership and you're getting a small condo or something like that, but you're planning to have kids in the future, and you know you're probably going to outgrow that 2-bedroom condo within a few years. That seems like the perfect situation to maybe not lock in a 30-year fixed unless it is the most affordable option. But would ARM be a good potential?
My first loan was an ARM.
Okay.
When I bought my house, I was 27, and we got a 5-year ARM for the same plan. We ended up being there 10 years, but the cost to refinance, and this is always something that I like talking to clients about. Let these decisions be data driven. Whatever the cost of the refinance, divide the savings into that, and if you break even with a time that's going to be comfortable for you, that you're going to be in the home, then it makes sense to at least consider that product. I think in general people are hesitant because we've been through the great financial crisis. There was lots of funky loan programs out there, negative amortization being one of them. But if you've got a fully amortized 5 or 7 year ARM, that's a long time, and you've got a lot of time to watch the market and see what it's going to do. You're going to have price appreciation through there, especially in a competitive real estate market. You're going to build equity, and so they're great programs to consider for sure.
And if you're, let's say, halfway through that ARMs, it's year 3, and all of a sudden interest rates are looking pretty nice, can you refi at that point and just lock in a different rate?
Absolutely. On owner-occupied properties, there's no prepayment penalties, so you're gonna refinance it. In California, you're probably going to pay $3,000 to $4,000 for escrow. Your lender fees are going to be $1,000 to $2,000. So you're $5,000 to $6,000 into this, but with an interest rate drop like we hope is on the horizon, you could break even on a refi in less than 12 years, or 12 months. Excuse me.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Do those require 20% down too, or are those?
No, you can go at 5% down. You can go 10% down as long as you've got a little bit of equity built up, and the rate improvement makes sense relative to the cost of the refinance. It's definitely worth looking at.
Okay. Last thing, I don't think we touched on it before. Jerome Powell potentially leaving, new guy. What's your take on how that might shake out?
Yeah, Kevin Warsh still has to be confirmed. What's interesting about what's going on right now, and there's some chatter in the media about how he's been very quiet. He's given no interviews. He's made no public, statements about what his philosophy is. He is an inflation hawk. Okay, so when inflation is in the market, like there was in the great financial crisis, he was a big proponent of hiking rates. So I think the administration has chosen to kind of leave him on the sidelines right now. Let's not let that guy talk, right? And so it'll be really interesting to see what his philosophy is as he becomes more public in speaking. And generally speaking, this administration tends to put in folks that will help the administration's agenda.
Right.
And so you have to think that he's going to soften for the Fed's rate stance and let the market dictate more of that than really the Fed interacting directly, which has been a lot of the Powell legacy, is lots of involvement from the Fed in mortgage rates, which, depending on which side you kind of fall on, has been problematic. And so I think lots of people in the market are excited about Kevin Warsh. Things that we can't predict, like Iran conflict and just general inflation.
A lot of moving parts.
A lot of moving parts.
Yeah, so we'll just have to see. Fingers crossed for everything.
Yes.
But that's all I got. I thank you so much for coming and sharing. It's so valuable to hear your perspective, especially our mixed perspectives. I think it gives a really good picture for anybody looking to buy in San Diego or across the country too. You're licensed everywhere, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. I'll link your number too if anybody's looking to buy anywhere. Hit them up. This is John. But thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Aaron. It was fun.
Yeah.